What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure to talk to brothers and sisters who are doing exceptional in every field of human endeavor, business, civic leadership, culture, you name it. And they get to share their God story, the ways in which God has been at work in their lives and the ways in which God has a hand in the way that they work. And today is no different. I have my brother, your brother, Jimmy Cox. What's going on, King?
What's going on? What's going on? Thanks for
Man,
having me.
it is a great pleasure, man. And I always love how I get introduced to people. It's one of those things where a brother's reputation precedes him. And I think this is going to be a dope conversation, particularly because I think this is going to give people even a different view of God and how God exists everywhere,
Yes.
and that how God is faithful with us, even at the times we least expect it. Now, Jimmy, you're a New York native. You could be in another state, but you always hail from here, man. So, who is Jimmy Cox, man? For
Yeah.
the people listening and watching, man, who's Jimmy Cox?
Jimmy Cox is a young kid at heart from
Mm,
Rochester, New York. Lived in all of the tri-state area from Connecticut to New Jersey to the Bronx, upstate, everywhere. Served 23 years in the Army. Actually left New York when I was 17 years old, did 23 years. And now I live in Waldorf, Maryland, because I retired in 2010 and I now work as a Department of Defense employee. So that's the quick version, of who Jimmy Cox is a
Yo,
little bit.
there's
So,
levels. I appreciate you giving the, the,
amen.
the heads up, because there are levels to this. And I think when you talk about Rochester and the time that it is, I think you guys won't be able to guess his age because my brother drinks water and works out. So you won't be able to guess his age, but he certainly was in Rochester at a time when things weren't necessarily the most flowery. And I think for you, understanding your story, the Army was an escape, right? It was escape to kind of get away.
Yeah,
17 years old, I need to get out of this place. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of things that I've seen, and I think that's a story for many brothers and sisters, that we hear about, right? When they go to the army, but uniquely for you, that was about escape. Can you talk about that time when you made that decision? Was there any kind of static around that? Because typically, when people think about the black community and the army, there's this interesting paradoxical relationship that sometimes comes up. So where was your mind
yeah.
at that time?
And that's a awesome question. So you hit it on the head. Back in 85, 86, 87, you already knew what it was. In the New York era, started going south. You know what I mean? And when I say south, I don't mean like south of the border south. Things just started going down. And at that time, of course, my mom drove school bus for handicapped children. My dad parked cars, at all right parking lot, in a little tin shack through the heat, snow, rain, whatever. And I know that I wanted to do something better uh, for my life. And all of my friends in the immediate west side of Rochester, it was rough. So I'm like, okay, I can't just pack up at 17 and just say I'm gonna go move to Florida and get this awesome job with high school education. So at that time, I said, you know what, I want to look into the military. Took the test for the Marines. I was this close to joining the Marines. I actually took the test uh, that I took for the Marines and actually just flipped it and went to the Army. So I went to the Army at 17. First duty station was Germany. So a young kid coming from that mind state, I want to do something, and you end up in Germany, a foreign country, at 18 at the time. So that kind of triggered me to start seeing the world. And that's kind of the reasons why I just want to go get a better life for myself, and ultimately start a family and become what who I am today, and actually be able to touch others in the
Mm.
process.
We'll get into the detail of just what you're doing, because what you're still doing is boundless, and you've kind of been able to cultivate and steward a global community of people around this issue of identity. I want to talk about it, and we'll talk about it with faith. But when I talk to my brothers and sisters who've been in the service, and I know many of them who I've been in the service, went to school with, who are my closest people, I would think that the God story would start there. I was prepared to be reading your stuff and be like, yo, I was stationed out here. I saw homie get knocked. I was like, nah, God gotta be here. But it happened for you a little bit later. So was it just that moment? I want us to take us into that moment when you driving and you have that deer experience, that kind of that veer off. But even
Ooh,
before that,
whoa,
was there
yeah.
not, when you gotta get introduced, was there not moments when you're stationed at these places where you're not thinking about fam, like I gotta get out of here? What was the dynamic and the crescendo to that moment in your 20s when you reset things?
So that's man, that's a good question, and I see you did your research because you hit the deer story, and that deer story is crazy. Um, even back before
Mm,
the deer story, there were some times where, and I've always been a God fearing person. I knew there was always a higher power, but I didn't understand it. And we'll probably talk about this a little later. I didn't understand it because I
mm,
never grew up in church with my parents. They worked driving buses, parking cars. Parking cars, driving buses, and then I started hanging out from you come outside from when the sun comes up, and you come home when the
mm,
the lights come on. So I mean, so in between that time, you're out there doing things with young 16, 17-year-old kids that are starting to go to
mm,
to the left. And one of the things that I remember, I seen a lot of stuff 15, 16 years old, and I'm like, wow, I don't want to
mm,
go down that path. So there were some things that happened. I've seen, some of my closest friends, um, that people lost their life. People went to jail. People that I know, people that I sat in science class with, is
mm,
still in jail, to this day after this 33 years gone from it. Um, so it's just that, like, I knew I was always a God fearing person and a very spiritual person. But as I went into the army, and it just kind of led to what I'm doing now with the whole Military Fresh Network, and it goes to that deer story. When that was the very first time I called Jesus' name 3 times in a row, and that's when, so there's and it's and I kind of want to ask you a question too, like how, like you said, how people meet, or and this is all, it's, I like to say the word mysterious
mhm,
instead of scary or,
mhm,
or crazy, because a lot of times when God works, people are real quick to say, man, that was crazy, man, that's scary. you know, Sometimes if God came to your doorstep right now and rang your doorbell and said, there's going to be a level of fear, right?
mhm,
And God is it is, you do fear God. So for the Jesus story, and how the Habakkuk 2 came about, it, it's it's mysterious how it all happens. So I got to say that because I want to kind of like paint a picture, because I didn't believe in Jesus until I was 28.
mm,
I just knew there was a higher power, and there was a God, and there's God created heaven and earth. I knew that, but I didn't believe in Jesus and called on the name of Jesus until I was 28. I remember like it was yesterday,
mm,
you know, and and how all that happened, and how people come into your life is just because I used to go to Bishop Mo's church in Connecticut, which
mm,
was the bishop over Hezekiah Walker.
mhm,
And me and Hezekiah Walker became friends, and I went to Love Fellowship in Brooklyn.
mhm,
Um, so, and some of those people there were the first people that helped me start to see and understand,
mm,
you know, and all of that is kind of fast forward up a little bit till I was 28, but it started from the city of Rochester, New York, and joining the army to help me get out of that, and then things happening in my life to make me open up and learn more about who God is, and what his power is, in Jesus' name, and
mm.
actually saying in Jesus' name, and when I saw that there, I almost thought that was it. And I said, Jesus, 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 for the
Bro,
very
walk them
first
back.
time,
Walk them back
you
from like
know?
you're driving on the road, like paint the picture again. So you driving on the road, you're 28. It's been a tough
Yeah,
time in your life at that point. So walk
yeah.
us through, narrate that for us.
So, at that time, and I bring this up because it's so vivid, like it's
Mm,
it's happened today. Like I was in God rest his soul, Bishop Mose, he taught me a lot. Hezekiah Walker taught me a lot. Rodney Brown, all these guys from Love Fellowship, right? And and my mom just passed too, by the way, November 8th. You
God
know,
rest his soul.
and thank
God
you.
rest his
So
soul.
I was in Connecticut, and I was going home to Rochester, and it was in the middle of the morning. It was real foggy or whatever, and I was going like through mountains because I'm going back upstate, and there was a deer that like just jumped right out in front of me, right? And this was when I was still questioning who was right, what was the truth, because I was confused because I was just learning at 28, and it wasn't just like, hey, say this, believe it. I'm 28, like, well, what about this? I had a lot of questions. Well, what about this, right? So anyway, I'm driving early in the morning, and a deer like jumped right out in front of my car, and it was, and I always say the story that I think I missed that deer by the size of a Coke can, right?
Mm.
and 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 I started swerving. I spun around. I spun around in circles, and I was, and I spun around, and the deer. I thought I was going to hit it because the deer's legs buckled up underneath it,
Mm.
right? And I swerved, and at that time I'm driving a five at the side, the BMW
Mm-hmm.
525
Mm-hmm.
rear wheel drive. It spins real easy, so I'm spinning out of control, and the deer fell, and I missed it. Like I said, that Coke can distance, and I got back in online, and I said, Jesus, 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 3 times. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and the deer just got up in the middle of the street and just like looked at me, right? And that's why I catch myself when I said that freaked me out so
Mm-hmm.
much. That touched me so much,
Mm-hmm.
where payphones, we had beepers, pages back then. We didn't have
Mm-hmm.
cell phones back then. This is in maybe 96, right? So I pulled over to a payphone. No, let me back up. When I said Jesus, 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 remind you, it was all fog. And I went around the curb, and I said Jesus, Jesus, Jesus within seconds. And people, I'm telling people, when I say this story, I say with everything I love, all the clouds were gone. And it was crystal blue sky.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I went around the corner, and I started crying. And this story always gets me when I tell the story. I
Mm-hmm.
started crying, and I pulled over, and I called my mom on a payphone, and I called to collect. And I was asking her, I was like, Mom, where did the clouds go?
Mm-hmm.
Yo, where did the clouds go? Right? And ever since then, I started seeing these numbers: 1111, 111, a series of ones. Ever since that time, I to this day I still see it. And that's when I knew that God entered my life,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and He had a bigger calling for me, a bigger purpose. Like, I'm here. I started tapping into like why I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, that's pretty much, man. That I'll never forget that story.
Mm. This is heavy because it's interesting. I don't know if it's just with us brothers, man, that a number of brothers had these near death experiences to wake us up,
Yeah,
right? Of one of my cats was just like, that was the day that Jesus really took the steering wheel, right? Because he got thrown
yeah,
into his passenger side. And then
yeah,
even in your story, the eeriness of looking eye to eye to a deer that probably should be dead and to a person that probably should be dead, and
yeah,
saying, "Yo," and the fog cleared up. I think these are the type of things that I think for brothers and sisters who may not even kind of have a sense of who God is. These
yeah,
seem a bit incredulous, but these are
yeah,
things that you can't deny. As on top of you being someone who served and has served faithfully in the military for how many years, that was the moment.
yeah,
That was the moment. You would think
yeah,
that it would be other things on top of the foundation. So what's interesting, man, is because we talked about this kind of this paradoxical battle, right, of identity, and it seems like that was to some degree some of the foundation of MFN at that time when you made it plain, right? For you, it wasn't. It was just like, all right, this idea that beyond the service I am in, there's more to me than
yeah,
this.
Yeah.
right? To what degree did God help you inform even just that thing? Because identity is a huge thing, right? To your point,
Yeah.
I served in the
Yeah.
military, but you're like, there's more to me than that. How much of
Yeah.
it was your faith journey that kind of helped you navigate what your vision really was about what you were really trying to accomplish, the space and community you're trying to create for obviously it was multiple, service
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah. So, and you're talking about the MFN, right?
Yep, yep, yep.
Yep. So that didn't happen until 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's crazy, right? Or how God works. So you got to think about it. When I was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, I was a recruiter at the time. I didn't ask to be a recruiter. I just came up on assignment to be an Army recruiter. I went to Bridgeport, Connecticut. At that time, I was married. I was young, married young at the time. At the time, me and my wife, my previous wife, then we were going through rocky times, and she didn't want to. I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Got assignment to go to recruiter school, become a recruiter in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She didn't want to go. We ended up splitting, but I became very good at recruiting. I was so good at it. I was supposed to do 36 months, 3 years, and I ended up doing 13 years as an Army recruiter. So this kind of starts gearing up to the why of what the Military Fresh Network is about. Because I spent 13 years influencing young men and women, predominantly in the urban communities on the East Coast,
Mm-hmm.
from starting off in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Newport News, Virginia, leaving Newport News, Virginia to the Bronx,
Mm-hmm.
right? And up until the time. So that's a whole span of 13 years. So I just started speaking to people on how the Army worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And every person that I put in the Army wasn't all just people with the same background and demographic as I had. But my story and my message of how the Army can assist you to get ahead, go to college, whatever. So I started being good at it, and I started putting a lot of people in. And then so fast forward 2010, I retire, and
Mm-hmm.
this is God. This is all God, because God was all let me see all of that to show me what my original calling was. That's going to be way up in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't know it yet until I really see it now. So 26 years old, being a recruiter, Bridgeport, 13 years training recruiters, retired 2010. I leave the Army. I got a job in the DOD government, and then within 18 months, an email pops up from nowhere saying that they're looking for brand managers for Army marketing. Right? I wasn't looking for a job. It pops up on my email to be the brand manager of having recruiting experience. So it put me at a, a really high level in the government as a marketing brand manager for the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I do 8 years of that. 13 years Army recruiting, 8 years of national level marketing for the Army. And then within that time, I start seeing, and this is God start talking to me, and this is how I get to the Habakkuk, right? And the whole Steve Harvey thing. And that's when I knew God is all involved in this, right? And he saved my life several times outside of the year, where I'm like, okay, the Army is paying multi-million, now billion-dollar contracts for marketing to get young men and women to say yes to serve. When I've been doing that since I was 26, all the way at the national level, and God was saying, hey, write down the vision, make it plain, so that he or she that reads it will run with it. I didn't even know that verse at the time. I didn't even know it was a book in the Bible called Habakkuk 2 verse 2. So I start this thing called Army Fresh, right? I didn't make a logo. I didn't use I used a green plain background with the block letters that said Army Fresh. And I was just gonna do the Army because I knew the Army. I didn't know the Marines. I didn't know the Navy. I didn't know one person in any other service that I could name off the top, right? So I did Army Fresh and Army Fresh Fitness, right? And stick in the green corner of the four color block You've probably seen it, right? So this is God again. God is saying, hey, you need to go bigger. You need to talk to everybody who serve that's in the multicultural world, like especially those who are normally underrepresented, that 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 don't normally fit into the veteran bucket when people look for US military veterans, and there's never a stage to kind of highlight and elevate those people of color that serve. You know what I mean? So I said Army Fresh Fitness. I got a master sergeant out in Korea that just came and started doing the fitness piece. So God said, no, you need to talk to everyone, not just the Army. And this is a true story, man. And I'm actually praying like, God, but I don't. How am I gonna, you know, continue this or sustain it? I don't know one Air Force person. I don't know one Marine. I don't know one Navy person like this. There's no way. So I didn't do it right away. So then someone else created a fake page that said Air Force Fresh with my vision statement. The vision statement, and the vision statement is our why. You know, the Military Fresh Network was created to show and prove to the world that we can serve our country, yet remain the unique individuals we were created to be. That's it. That's our why, right? Because we never had that before, right? So somebody created an Air Force Fresh with the same words. They just took the words I put from Army Fresh, put it on there, and I'm like, you know what? No way. So I went and locked it all down. And sure enough, God provided people from all those services to help me run all of those pages. And now we got a chat group of 70 plus people, plus over 100 ambassadors across the world that volunteer on a volunteer basis, because the message and the why, and this is a God-given vision. And I always give God all the praises, all the praise. Like, this was a vision given to me by God. This isn't me. This isn't me. God gave me this vision because you know how many people that serve their country that come from a Chicago or Alabama or Detroit or Baltimore that have the same exact thing that I went through 23, 33 years ago. And it's the same exact story that people had those years ago. And now, to throw a spin on that, there's a lot of marketing to this, and there's a media platform to this. And just like the revolts, right? Shout out to my brother Detavio. I saw he was on your show.
Yep.
Hey, that's my guy. So Detavio. So we actually did work together when I was in marketing for the Army, and he was with Radio One. So that's a good friend of mine. So how all of this just transpired and laid out in front of me. Recruiter 13 years, 8 years national marketing, and now I work for diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? For the Army. So that is nobody but God to place me into all these places to be able to amplify the voice of the underserved, you know? And so I feel like what I'm doing is no different than what Diddy's doing for Revolt and Black News, or whatever. And I'm saying that the Military Fresh Network is all for people of color. Yeah, it's multicultural led, but it's for everyone that feels like when they serve, they don't have a voice to show the extraordinary things they do outside of serving. Like, you can continue to be a musician. You can continue to own a business. You can continue to do whatever it is that you want to do, and you just don't have to put that on hold just because you serve your country. And I'm a prime example of that. And that's why I created the Military Fresh Network, to explain and show that. And I'll leave you with one last thing. It's no different than the Players Tribune, right? Are you tracking what the Players Tribune is?
Yep. Jeter first started off and all them. Yep.
So check this out. The Players Tribune. Okay, they're highlighting the person behind the uniform who's already got one of the biggest platforms out there to tell their story. They're already making millions. People are wearing their jerseys, right? But what about the people who serve, who put their life on the line for for all of our freedom. You know, that don't get to go home for Christmas. That was some of the best rappers, singers, songwriters, poets, musicians, whatever, but they don't have that opportunity or that platform because they're serving. So that's what the Military Fresh Network is about, to give a fresh perspective of what it's like to serve your country and tell it from a new, dynamic or point of view.
Brother, I love the analogy, but obviously it preceded the analogy of the player truth, because this is why this is dope to me, bro. On one hand, right, there's this like, how does God play into this? Because there's some view of like telling your story, right, around the recruiting. Because like you said, it's like all I'm telling is that my story and what this did for me, right, and sharing that, right. And I think that is something that's a shadow of, I think, people's stories and testimonies with God. To say, I'm not here to so much convince you or knock you over the head. I'm just here that this is what happened to me. And I think that's
Yeah,
just a pattern of being able to be authentic and communicating something to someone in ways that they can receive it. So I just don't want people to miss that. The power of
yeah,
story, the greatest story of all time, the greatest storyteller of all time is Jesus, is God, right? And so I
yeah,
think there's something to be said about that. That's number one.
yeah,
Number two, this is so true and spot on, right? I think when I talked about this paradox, again, for some people, when they hear military, there's different, if depending on their proximity to people they care about who serve.
yeah,
So if you
yep,
don't have that proximity to somebody who served, typically all you're filling in about perspectives is like, it's like the voices we don't hear from.
yeah,
It's like we don't know.
yeah,
We just know that these cats are going to bro, and you don't know. And so to your point, it's like these are real people. What would it look like for these people to have a voice? The nuance that would offer in terms of people's perspectives on what's actually taking place, how people
yep,
experience it. And I do think this is why, to the discussion we talked about, the discomfort around the conversation is because people only have kind of limited data points on what this is, and they're not hearing from the people who actually live these lives and then come back home, right? And I
yeah,
do think this is great. I'm going to ask you this question, man, because I think, especially around identity, you find this in professional sports, which I think is a good parallel, right? Once you finish, there is such a heavy journey of who am I? Like,
yeah,
who am I after all of this? And so,
yep.
for you, because you obviously stay active, you've always continued to work. Was that something that you navigated? Is that something consistently where within that community, you're able to help people with a gospel lens navigate? Okay, you've done this for more than half of your life. Now
Yeah,
you're coming home. Who are you? Right? What does
yeah.
that look like for somebody who connects? What did that look like? What did that look like for you? How did you find a way to lock into an identity, a godly identity, after leaving something like that?
So that's a good question. So and that's why we use the word fresh, right?
Mm,
And I'm gonna tie it to exactly what you said. Every new day there's a fresh person entering into the military, right?
mm,
And every new day there's a fresh person leaving the military, right? The fresh concept and why we associate it with our military is about a fresh state of mind, right?
mm,
And what happens is a lot of people serve, they become so military that that's all they know.
mm,
It's harder for them to find who I am without all of these people telling me where to be at a certain time, being in a formation, all dressing the same time, eating at the same time, doing this, shopping at the PX, the commissary, all the things on this one little bubble of an island on an army base or a navy base or whatever, on a ship or whatever. So if you continue to have that fresh state of mind and never lose sense of self, it won't be that hard for you to find out
mm.
who I am. You should be who you are while you serve. Continue to be you, right? Of course, be more disciplined. You're going to learn. You're going to be, something greater than yourself. You have a lot of sacrifice or whatever. But at the same time, with me serving 23 years, I don't feel like I ever had to look and find
Mm,
out who I was. I'm still the amped, motivated, energetic, spiritual, soulful person as I was
mm,
15 years ago because I never lost sight. And I feel like I want to create that platform and that stage to let more people know it's okay. Like to let more people know it's okay to be you.
mm,
They'll adjust. Not you be them and then you have to adjust when you're done with being them.
mm.
You know what I mean? So that's where it's at. And I want to create something through God's vision to let them make the easier transition through a fresh mindset state and just connect it to a higher calling because it's bigger than us.
Bro,
You know,
this
you
this is
know.
this is powerful because I think this is so transferable, right? Whether you're talking about professional sports or whether you're talking, especially over the past year, this is evergreen, of course, but it's over the past year that people who their lives have changed in an instant. Job, what they always knew,
Yeah,
right? If you're the mother who was like working and now you're like, shoot, I got to take care of the kids at home because there's no babysitter. Like your sense of identity is like, who am I? Like this is all
yeah,
I've known. I've known myself
yeah,
as an attorney. I've known myself as a banker. I know myself as this tech leader. And then when that shifts,
yeah,
can you have a fresh perspective on who you are, right? In a way that allows you to continue to kind of like reinvent and reimagine who you are. And I think that's transferable. That's number one. Number two,
yeah.
so I think I over almost, and I appreciate you slowing down and breaking this down. Sometimes you forget that it's almost like you're going in and you feel like there's a loss of identity, right? And I think people can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I have to wear the same uniform. I have to be here at a certain time. Where is the space or margin for me to be myself? So it's almost like, brother,
Yeah,
one, it's giving a live platform in real time for people who are there, brothers and sisters who are there, right? So, okay, I got an outlet, right? Because so
yeah,
much of what I do has to be uniform in some sense, in quotes, obviously. But then when I leave, this is a
yeah.
great opportunity. So, bro, I just think that this, what you're saying, I think will help people, regardless of whether they have military background or not, because I do think it's important. Who am I beyond this? Do I don't
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
sacrifice this, John? So, with in addition to the vision, I think now just to kind of level set people, you have MFN Consulting, you have Army Fresh, you have Navy Fresh, you have all these verticals. Then you have the fitness vertical, brother. Just that for me as a guy who got multiple hats and we work in and doing that. How does God help you manage a rhythm that's sustainable? In ways that number one,
you
you're
know.
also modeling a sustainable thing, right? And number two, you ain't just burning out in these streets, man. Like, so what does that look like with you and God? What's the prayers like? What are the boundaries like? How do you make this work?
Okay, so good question. So number one, I talk to God all day throughout the day. As soon as I walk down the steps, I have like a routine what I do. So I pray. I pray and I talk to God. And I kind of got this from Steve Harvey. And I'm gonna tell you that story about Steve Harvey and the Habakkuk later. But you know how he makes jokes, how he talks to God, where he's like, he just talks to him like he's one of his friends or whatever. But I walk down the steps before I turn the light off. I pray. Number one. Number two is
Mm,
my team. God first. Number two, my team. I cannot do
mm,
this without my team. And I love them to death. I hope they hear this part. I cannot do it without my team. I got a team of volunteers from all over the world, from all services that love and believe in this so much. Not because of Jimmy, right? Because I prefaced it with this is a God-given vision. And I show up with that daily. I make it a point to never show up like this is about Jimmy. Support me. No, this is bigger than us. I always say we're just
mhm,
vessels, right? And God uses us because whatever it is that you're doing, it can expand. So what keeps me sane because I juggle a lot, and sometimes I do get weary. I'm human nature. I mean, it's human nature. But I always say to myself that He wouldn't have gave me
mm,
this if I wasn't ready, right? And I feel like he's been showing me the
mm.
way ever since the whole 11-11 seeing the alignment. People on my team now who are really getting closer are seeing the 11-11 the alignments, and it's a series of individuals aligned, right? And I don't know if you ever Googled the meaning of 11-11 or a series of
I
ones.
remember you talked about kind
You
of the
know,
alignment, what it represented, alignment.
yeah. So I found that out, and I believe in my heart that God put this on me when I was ready because I've been doing it 5 years. 7 years ago, I wouldn't be ready. I wasn't ready 7 years ago. I sure enough wasn't ready 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I would have messed this thing up all the way. So now I'm in a place in my life where I know I'm ready, and I know this is God because the way He keeps coming through. So I think, to be honest, how does this happen? I give all praises and credit to God because I feel like He pulls me out of bed, like not pushes me out of bed. I feel like I'm pulled every single day. Like as soon as I wake up, I say, thank you, God, for letting me see another day. And I start thinking of what's next, what has to do. This is bigger, like this is touching more people. So many people are connecting, but what keeps this thing together, I just gotta say, God and my team, and me believing, like having that faith the size of a mustard seed. Like God, this is what you want me to do. This is my purpose. This is my calling. Like when they say that your purpose or your gifts, right, are in you before you're born. I feel like my purpose and my gift is not for me. My gift is for others. So I believe that, and that's what keeps me driving hard to make sure this is seen. And I want the world to see this because we don't have that platform. And sometimes people serve and they forget about us, and they don't think of us until they're saying, "Rest in peace, soldier killed in Afghanistan," and you're like, "Oh, God bless, RIP," and then you go on to the next one, and you never even think twice of who that soldier or that Marine or service member was. And I'm here to change that.
Bam. This is the ability and the opportunity to give people to share people's stories, man. I think that is something not to speed past. It's almost like it's this view. People always talk about back in the day, our relationship with work has changed, right? So back in the day, it used to be dad left the house, you ain't hear from him. It's like the Chris Rock thing. You ain't hear from him till he came back home. There was no midday calls, nothing like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah,
especially when you think about the service, I think people's more commercial understanding is like there's that deployment, there's the waving at the airport, and it's just like I'm gonna see you. You're gonna write letters, you know what I mean, in bottles, and then you come back. But to your point, it's just like life is being lived in between. Life is being lived. These are full people, and
yeah,
so it's actually a divine thing for people to have an opportunity to share their story, because that's what we're called to as Christians, to share our story with people. And there's something about our story that people will
yeah.
understand and be moved by. Um, I also this I think this piece, man, about just I'm always interested when people talk about just the coming home and being in a different place in their lives, and trying to understand how God is going to be at work, how God is like operates. I'm always curious about just limits we place. So for example, a consistent issue is that God has given people a vision, but they're overwhelmed by the vision.
Mm-hmm,
And I think from what you're saying, it's almost like
mm-hmm,
Exodus and 18, when kind of like his father-in-law Moses is like, "Yo, I'm doing all this." Father like, "Yo, you're doing too much." And I think some people overlook the
mm-hmm.
fact that what's also godly is how you rely upon people to do the work. So if it's bigger than you, that's perfect, which means that number one, it's a God vision. Number two, it's going to
Yep.
rely
Amen.
upon you bringing other people in. And so I don't want people to miss the fact that you have
Amen.
a team of people who are motivated by the mission and the vision. And it is godly,
Mm.
in fact, to spread that responsibility and that shared care for the mission amongst people, because they also get transformed by it. But it's also something, a pattern of scripture we
Yes.
saw where Moses was like, "Oh, let me listen. Like, if God's thing, if I believe about the mission, is not about me, then I need to see to it that people are involved." And so I don't want people to miss that in your toolkit, man, how you're speaking about this, because you say it very matter of fact, but I want people to do the research beyond off this. Is my brother's doing a lot, and it wouldn't be
Thank,
possible if it
thank
wasn't
you.
for the brothers and
Thank
sisters that are alongside with you. But brother, I think you kind of gave a little bit
you.
of
Amen.
detail about just what your rhythm with God looks like. What would you say now? I think as you're kind of looking forward, what is it that you're looking forward to doing? What's ahead for MFN Consulting? What's ahead for Army First? Like, what is something that you're looking to accomplish to kind of continue to realize this mission?
So a couple things, and this is God too. I want to be able to, um, so I'll tell you this. So the media side, I'm trying to create a hub for, because of course we're on Instagram, heavy on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We have we have experiential fitness events, in-person events, but we couldn't do one, of course, of COVID. But what I would love to do is a couple things. Number one is create a hub to amplify those voices and extraordinary things that our service members are doing out there. So if you're a real estate agent, right, and you're a veteran, right, so there's two things. We want to be able to come to the Military Fresh Network, upload all of your listings, all of your houses, whatever. But then we drive traffic to you as a real estate agent, but we also bring in assistance from another veteran who say, for instance, hey, I'm getting ready to get stationed in Texas. I get to go to the Military Fresh Network, click Texas. I'll go to Texas. It'll list all of the veteran real estate agents. So now I get to connect with another real estate agents who drive traffic and business to that business, but I'm also assisting that individual who serves. And we're gonna go down a list. I'm a musician, same thing. Hear my music. Come to the hub. You can hear military members that happen to serve and they're in Japan, but they're just as good as a Jay-Z, but they serve and they don't have the Sonys and the Rock Nations to hear them. You can come there and let them be heard. All veteran owned and operated. If you're bloggers, if you're fitness enthusiasts, if you're, you hear where I'm going with this? All of the things that you're looking for. If you're looking for transition assistance, if you're looking for a hotline for services, if you have a t-shirt company, so all of the designers who happen to be military members actively serving or veterans, you get to come to the Military Fresh Network and get all of that different type of content and merch or benefits or whatever it is that you're looking for. So that's one of the things I'm doing on the media side, right? So
no. I'm taking this in, man. But a question came to mind. But I want to make sure you finish.
Oh no. So kind of like that on the media side. So now just amplifying the voices and all the great things that we do that serve. That's just on the media side. So I'll stop there because I got a lot more things going on different platforms and different other things. That's just the digital media
brother
space.
Man, and even in and of that self, man, I think that's wave moving, brother. I'm curious for this, man. I can't have this conversation without asking you this question. I think when we look at let's talk about just the Black community, Black, Latino, but specifically the Black African American community in the, let's say, the States. It seems, and a number of brothers we talk about this, like there's a resurgence or almost like a redemption, a reclamation for brothers, right? To kind of reclaim their place in the community, in their homes, in their families. And coming from a military background, have you felt that you've been sensing that God has kind of placed this as part of, in addition to what you're doing, do you always get a sense to say, there's so many invaluable skills about structure, about how to think about life, about things that you've taken from the military, you wish, like, I wish that this was just readily accessible, maybe for that person that may not be able to enlist, but I want to do this. Have you ever felt that tension? Am I off? Do you not feel this? And where have you found this? Do you feel like there's something to be said about what you've learned, what's in that network that you have, and how that could be serving brothers and sisters outside of the military, right? In terms of brothers becoming the type of men that they're called to be.
Yeah, so you know what? And that's and I talked to a good friend too. And he's another veteran too, a brother out there doing it, killing it, named Keenan Beasley. Shout out to Keenan. He's out there. He has a hair care line called Sunday to Sunday. He's a West Point graduate. He's killing it. So we had a conversation, a week ago, and he was saying the same thing that you said. Like, it starts in the military, but what we have can expand outside of that, and we kind of started that with our fitness events. We have a fitness and experience, a networking event it was called Military Fresh Fitness or Military Fresh Fit Fest. And it took off so much. Well, we took over a whole block in Harlem the year before COVID. People traveled from all over the world, and we had entertainers and fitness trainers on stage that didn't even serve. It was they wanted to give back to the veteran community that we had a bus come in that was all civilians. So it started expanding. So we had all the tents that I bought, all the flags that I bought that said Military Fresh Fit Fest. I had to scrap all of that, and we call it just the MFN Fit Fest now because so many people said, I love what you guys are doing. How can I get involved? But it says military, but I never served. So I had to get rid of that and expand it. And it's called the MFN Fit Fest. So that's exactly, to your point, one area that we had to do that with. So that's one. Have you heard about Fresh Flask?
No, I've not.
Okay. So we had to do the same thing with this. So Fresh Flask is an expansion that started with the military. But if you notice, it doesn't say the word military nowhere. But all people love to keep their beverages fresh. So if the only thing that you see this military is the 4 color block that says veteran owned and operated, and we give back the police deployed military. But this is just a fresh flask, no different than a Yeti or a Hydro flask or all of the tumblers that you currently purchase now. But this is all stemmed from the Military Fresh Network, and we have our own first African American and veteran owned and operated thermos and tumbler company, and we keep your beverages fresh. So it's starting to expand outside of just a military thing. And one other thing that we did during COVID, we paid the mortgage of 2 veterans in need that were displaced by COVID. Just a blessing. We're not a nonprofit. We just get donations come out of pocket, and we paid the mortgage of 2 separate veterans through our network that just went into rough times due to COVID. So it's coming. It's not all going to happen overnight, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah, no, I think this is I think this is just the direction and the spirit and the direction of where things are going. I think is invaluable, and I think particularly as someone who is you're a community builder, brother. Beyond that, you're building communities and deepening connections in ways that serve the world. And I think that is just undeniable. What I also see is that, to your point, this is just the beginning, because I do think that in these times, there's a real need, right? I'll talk about even a crisis between brothers and sisters in the world. And I think that, the skills, some of which you got from your uncle and your aunt, right? But not every, but some of which is just for the destruction of things you learned in the military for some of these brothers and sisters, but particularly brothers who just get that in some form. I think this is going to be great and powerful. But clearly, I'm preaching to the choir on this. I think you know that and see that, brother, man. Like how could people follow and connect with you? Because I think that people's minds, the wheels are going to be turning, right, when they see what you're doing, how you've thought about it, how God is in the DNA of what you're doing. How do people kind of catch up and support what you're doing, bro?
Probably the quickest way. Well, there's on Instagram, of course, Military Fresh Network on Instagram. Jimmy Cox I'm on LinkedIn. You can check out our website, www.militaryfreshnetwork.com. I mean, I'm everywhere. If you look at anything with the word fresh next to the military, I'll pop up. So you'll find me out there. But Military Fresh Network is the quickest way to send a DM or whatever, or email, and that's info@militaryfreshnetwork.com.
This is dope. I have to ask you this question as the closing one, brother. I always ask everybody this question. A brother, sister is kind of where you're at. They may at a tangential level have some understanding of God. They're like, there's a spiritual thing happening around there, but they're in a place where they're just not necessarily sure what place God has in their work, in their life, and God, for some reason, but for clear reasons, had them come to you, and they're like, yo, what's my first step? I'm not even sure, if this makes sense for me or not. It just seems like you got something that I don't really rock with. Like, what would be the advice you would give to someone who just came to you and say, like, what should I don't know if God is for me, but I just keep seeing it around. What would you say to them?
So with that, if with the last thing you said, I don't know if God is for me, but I just keep seeing it around. If you keep seeing it around, God is there, and God is for you, because that's why you keep seeing it around, right? Just like those numbers, I keep seeing them around for the last 20 plus years, where so much I had to go find out more and Google it. So my advice to them was, if this is the first step, you feel it, and when it's time, you'll feel it. And when you keep seeing it around, that's God, and he's there for a reason. So it's not going to be popping up by accident, because I told you I didn't believe in Jesus till I was 28. And even when I got into the church, I had a lot of questions, and I didn't believe in people, because people would lead you down the wrong road, even within the church. So you already see that. So you can't follow people, but I would say, if you feel it, number one, you'll feel it in your heart, right? And when God gave me this vision on 21 September 2015, I accepted it. I knew it was him, and I haven't stopped since. And you'll just know when it's time. It can't be forced. I can't tell you it's going to show up on this date. Give it 2 weeks and it'll, come back. You'll feel it. You'll know. and it's going to happen when you least expect it.
Mm.
And you just keep your heart pure, right? And keep your heart pure. As long as God will find a way to insert that seed that where it's not on a stony heart, right?
Mm.
If once it gets in there once, it's just going to start growing. And the day that I saw that deer and I spun around and I called his name 3 times, I didn't look back since. You
Mm.
know, so that's what I'll tell them. They'll know. And God, you just gotta be open and able to receive.
Mm.
You know, so that's what I would tell them.
My brother, it's the scripture says, though it may linger, wait for it. And then Habakkuk.
Yes,
Brother, this is not the only conversation you and I will have, brother, but I'm just thankful
yes, yes,
on behalf of brothers and sisters who will hear this and who will see this, for you being faithful to this vision, for how you're stewarding and serving brothers and sisters who have served the country, how you've been authentic, but ultimately the fact is that someone who knows God in that space that just would give people hope that redemption is there. Redemption is there. And so, brother, man, I'm
yes,
thankful for you, man. All respect
yes.
to you, man. And I look forward to keeping this conversation rocking with you. Salute. Uh, be
Likewise,
well.
likewise. Thank you, bro.